You would have thought I would have made this video sooner, given how much time and effort I put into music mixing. As many of you will know, I love getting the right song for the right moment in my videos. In fact, it is the second longest part of the production process, behind the actual narration itself. My obsession with music/plot mixing comes from a source that you should fully know I'm a massive nerd of if you've been watching this channel long enough. Halo. If not for Halo, I don't think I'd have nearly as much comprehension of emotional tone when doing post-production. Go watch any structured narration, creepypasta, audiobook, or other that uses music. You'll notice a lot of them just have a droning background ambience. That while I've done occasionally, the majority of my videos have tailored soundtracks. Granted, I can give a pass to people who don't music mix very much for audiobooks, as they can run in the several hours region. I don't know if other channels legitimately don't comprehend music mixing with plots, or if they're just lazy, but I notice it, and it's a big reason why I can't really watch other narrators. Music in a plot can serve to drive an emotion without blatantly saying it. It can be used to embolden a moment, to accentuate a development in the story.
I know you. Your past. Your future.
I killed those people. That's what I can be.
No, you can't. You're not.
I'm whatever Gotham needs me to be. Call it in.
Music is a universal language. It speaks the language of emotion. It is an intimate language. How many of you listen to Japanese songs you heard in an anime opening? I have several. I understand maybe 4 or 5 words in Japanese, but for the most part, I have zero understanding of what the singers are saying. But I still enjoy the song. You don't need to know English, Mandarin, Spanish, or Latin in order to understand a drum beat or a guitar riff. That is why a good soundtrack sticks with you. Think of your favorite OST from any movie, TV show, or game. Why does it stick with you? Because it speaks the emotion of what it's trying to convey fluently, especially when paired with a scene in the media it's used in. This is why from the time we are too young to speak, and when we are too old to speak, music still holds a place in our minds. And this is why I'm as particular about the music mix in my videos as I am. If I'm going to speak such an intimate language, I'm going to do it right. To start, how does one compile music to use? You'll want to get a library of music that won't get you in trouble by YouTube's completely airtight content ID system that is never abused. We'll explore my collection of royalty-free music. For starters, anyone who knows creepypasta well will know this artist, Mayuji. Absolute classic in the genre. His music was and is pretty much tailor-made for creepypasta. Next, this artist is used for a lot of stuff, not just creepypasta. Kevin MacLeod. His music is decent, but certainly has that royalty-free sound to it. Ben Sound, Eric M. Music, Erlen Flatten, and Repulsive are much newer additions to my library compared to the other two, but their sound is great. There's a reason why I use them a lot. I do have many songs that aren't strictly speaking royalty-free, and that's why God invented pitch shifting and slowing down. Side note, almost all my artists are subcategorized into the feel of the track. Background for when nothing is really happening in the story. Build up for when things are getting interesting. Climax for, well, the climax of the story. And lastly, mix. for tracks that have one, two, or all three tones to them. These ones I admittedly don't work with much. I usually only get small portions of them, as oftentimes plots do not shift in tone as fast as the music does. Now, I'll be going through some music and telling you how it feels to me personally. This song gives me a sense of desolation, a bombed out city, streets littered with corpses. The deep piano vibes give it that large-scale feeling of looking at a destroyed cityscape, while the higher-pitched notes bring a personal feel, a lone figure standing amongst the destruction, mourning what used to be. Mind you, this version is custom pitched because it gets content ID'd all the time due to the sheer similarity with Gary Jules' version. This is one of my all-time favorite tracks, as evidenced by how often I use it. It has a medium-sized feel to it, with some of the deeper tones being accompanied by the lighter ones at the same time. It gives me a sense of disgusting realization. A character discovers the horrible truth, all hope is lost, and they're resigning themselves to demise. In the case of my usage of it in Corruptus, the main character, after reading off a list of Corruptus entities, is realizing how far spread this issue is, how much Disney is covering up. It's a sickening revelation, similar to my use of it in Pen Pal. This is another favorite of mine as well, but I unfortunately don't get to use it as often since most creepypasta don't have the right feel for it. At least I don't think they do. It is a macabre joy this song gives me. The character knows they're going to die, but they've come to terms with it, and know that everything will be okay. Maybe they solved the big problem, took out the antagonist, but were mortally wounded in the process. Maybe their death will allow others to live. And that's why I'm not able to use it in a lot of stories, because most don't have that plot. So far, I believe my only use of it was in the Pastel Man remaster at the end. Spoilers, when the main character finds his peace after he breaks the deal with the demonic creature, which will ultimately end in his death, but his son will live. Of course, this song can easily be used for a happy ending as well, or at least a presumably happy ending. When music mixing The Strangers 2, I was either going to use this song or the one that I ended up using, which I will cover on this list as well. While I have never played any of the Silent Hill games, nor listened to their OSTs before knowing about Mayuji, this cover instantly hooked me. It sounds simple, having an almost playful feel to it, with a mildly sinister twist, as if you're discovering strange things about the world. Depending on how the story plays it off, this song is one of my favorites to use for that feeling of, the situation is over for us, but it might pop up again. Like when I used it at the end of Come Follow Me. Spoiler: all but one person involved with the mysterious case are now dead, and it's pretty much over in everyone's eyes. But the code still exists in some game cartridges, and you could be the next victim of it. It also has that feeling of being somewhere that used to be populated, but is now deserted. That strange, isolated feeling This is easily another favorite. The feeling this song instills is exactly what I used it for in Come Follow Me. When the case seems to have run cold, everyone was moving on to other things. Time and people were leaving it behind. But there were questions that hadn't been answered. The song felt like it could have been in a scene of one of the detectives staring at a wall full of newspaper clippings from the case, trying to piece it together after everyone else has given up. I can also see it being used to get a feeling of sorrow and realization, like my use of it in Lost Episodes. Again, spoilers. When the main character finds his childhood friend mutilated and augmented by his own doing. This song does a very similar thing as my Yuji's Promise cover. It has that feeling of discovery, but with more inclinations to the darker nature of what that discovery might be. A character in an abandoned building, looking at the ruination of a once pristine place. To end this list, the song that I used at the end of Strangers 2. If this hadn't slapped me in the face with the perfect tone, it would have been my Yuji's Another Day. This song perfectly encapsulated the feeling I was going for. Spoilers, that sense that the character had been through hell, but finally made it out. A sense of relief. Another feeling that can be added to it, as was the case with the Strangers 2. A nervousness about returning home after such a long time. Overall, this track hits me with the feeling of relief after a long struggle. I can also see it being used for an intimate romance feeling as well. After all, the visuals for the video I got it from have a semblance of that anyways. Mind you, I had this song before I wrote The Strangers 2, but I hadn't used it before that point, so I wasn't aware it would fit the way it did until I gave it a shot. And I am very thankful I did. Now, did any of those descriptions I gave of the feeling of those songs resonate with you? If so, that's how I know what to choose. If it makes me feel a certain way, that's probably going to ring true for a majority of people. As much as we like to pretend to be different and special, there's a reason a depressing song makes you feel depressed, or an upbeat song makes you feel good. Because we generally comprehend emotions in the same way. One major help is that I know the songs from my Yuji and a few others well enough that as I'm narrating, I can sometimes think of a song that will fit the moment well, or when I'm going through the audio and I know what tone it calls for, I can refine the number of songs in my head and have something possibly already chosen before I go into the folder. That's mostly just a good thing for time saving, but it also shows a good comprehension of emotional tone. Another thing I do that I'm sure pretty much anyone who watches this does as well. When listening to music, I imagine scenes from movies or apply it to scenes in my own stories. This is true for both my production music and my personal music library. Lastly, despite having favorite tracks, I do try to mix it up and not use them nearly as often as I would like to. As good as they are, it will get repetitive hearing the same song used in every video. The last part of this video is going to be focused on appropriate music for the scale of the plot. Mind you, I'm not a musician. I have a surface-level knowledge of explaining the technical aspects of music. When it comes to music mixing, mind the in-story situation size you're doing. Whether it's a creepypasta, action, sci-fi thriller, or anything else. Scale refers to how large the events of the story are. Does it affect an entire city, a town, a single house? How many people are involved? And how important are they to the world around them? Oftentimes, though, the larger the trouble, the bigger the music should sound. This can be accomplished with stuff that has deeper undertones to it, or a low droning sound. such as these tracks all have in common notes that linger or drone on, mostly lower tones, sometimes accented by higher-pitched ones. Overall, though, they have a large sense to them. Some examples of stories that can be mixed with larger-sounding music like this is Sounding of the Fifth Trumpet, The Glutton, nearly any Lovecraft story, the later parts of Strangers, Psychosis, and The Art of Jacob Emery. The next few examples are something I would use for small, low-impact stories. You'll notice they consist of more short notes. While low tones can feel personal if they're short as well, higher-pitched stuff achieves that interpersonal sense much easier. Stories that these songs can often work for are things like Mr. Widemouth, Out with a Bang, Bedtime, and a whole lot of other creepypastas, since this genre is mostly small-scale stories. Something that also must be taken into account is if the story has paranormal aspects to it. Stories like The Midnight Train and Bedtime. More spoilers. While dealing with a train that takes the riders to the afterlife, or a ghost trying to kill you, while technically being very large-scale concepts of different planes of existence, it focuses on the life of one person to each respective story, and their time spent with these things. While normally a story that has a focus on the afterlife would call for larger sounding music, choirs, and so on, because it affects a very small number of people who have very little impact on the world at large, you can get away with more personal sounding music mix. To finally end this video, music mixing is an art form on its own. Use logic to figure out the technical aspects of a story, but use emotion when you want to convey emotion, especially through music.